Salam everyone, my name is Ryan Hassan and today I'm joined by special guest Micheline Maalouf. She's a psychotherapist based in Florida who focuses on trauma, anxiety, ADHD, and most importantly discusses mental health as an Arab living in the West. Micheline, thank you so much for coming in today,
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me.
of course. First off, I want to take some time so that you can introduce and share a few things about yourself, including your road and motivation to become a psychotherapist.
Okay, yeah. My name is Micheline Maalouf. I'm Lebanese Syrian, um, and I'm a psychotherapist, as you mentioned. So I own a therapy practice in Orlando, Florida, and I help people with all the things you mentioned: ADHD, anxiety, depression, trauma, mostly a lot of childhood trauma, but also one of the main things I focus on is the identity issues for Arab Americans living in the diaspora. So, the identity struggles of having a culture at home and a culture outside the home. And then I also I'm an advocate online and provide mental health resources and information on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And I accidentally blew up in 2020 during the pandemic by sharing information on mental health. So that's kind of become another part of my life now. And yeah, some things obviously we're human beings, not just defined by our work, and I really like to emphasize that. So I love hanging out with my family, traveling when I can, and spending time dancing and connecting with my culture.
All right, that's wonderful. What are some common mental health challenges that you see among Arab clients?
Oh, one of the main things is that identity challenge that I was talking about. And it's almost like when we grow up, we don't really get too much time to self-explore and to like know what we truly want. We have expectations placed on us by our parents, cultural expectations, maybe for some of us religious expectations. And I think that makes it really challenging for us because we are a collective culture. It's a beautiful thing, but I think sometimes it just kind of we get erased in the process of it. So one of the main things I see is even in terms of like figuring out what to do for work or as career, we're always like, I have to do this or that. And it's basically, the top three that we're told in Middle Eastern engineer, lawyer, doctor. I see a lot of young people that are trying to go to law school, for instance, or going to medical school and sometimes when I ask, one of the questions I ask is why? Why did you choose this profession? I'm always curious as to why people chose. And that is the question that tends to stump everybody. Everybody's like, and then if they answer, it's like for the first time, they're finally like realizing they haven't really thought about it. It was just like something they thought they chose when they were like 3 years old. But really, it's probably subconsciously ingrained in our brains, like what we have to do from that point. So it's a lot of identity in terms of that, a lot of identity issues in terms of relationships as well. Like growing up in the West, I see a lot of people that are really battling, like wanting to find someone to be with within their culture, but at the same time, not finding someone that really meets their needs and expectations, maybe falling in love with someone outside the culture, outside their religion. And now they're battling, a crisis within the family or themselves. And then on top of that, it's not really open or allowed for us to really express we have anxiety, we have depression, or knowing that our families have anxiety and depression. Like we see it, we know it based on the ways that they behave, but they won't acknowledge it. Um, so those are the basic things. But now, seeing what we're seeing in the world, obviously there's a lot more to that. There's just the vicarious trauma from having family that lives in the Middle East still, not maybe survivor's guilt for not being able to be there to support, like why us, why are we here and safe when they're not. um, just the political trauma that we see with the discrimination that happens in our world. So there's like a wide, I mean, I could go on for like 30 minutes expressing all the things we deal with, but basically a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah, I get that, honestly.
Yeah.
So I want to head to the third culture, which is very interesting to me. And you discuss it a lot throughout your Instagram posts. But could you like describe what it is real quick and how does being a part of this culture affect the self-esteem of personal identity growth of Arab kids raised in the Western countries?
Yeah. So a third culture kid means that you have a third culture, a different culture than that of your home culture, that your parents live at home because they immigrated or maybe you immigrated, and the culture of the place where you live. So for instance, people living in America that are, let's say, Lebanese would have the Lebanese culture being lived at home. They'll have the American culture being lived in society. And so what happens is there's this merger in that identity that we form, and we call that the third culture. So it's like you're a mix, you're a hybrid between two different worlds. And it can get really complex because there's people that are mixed with different cultures more than just two. So obviously it could, like I was mentioning earlier, bring up a lot of identity confusion, identity issues, but it also comes with a lot of strength. So yeah, I do talk a lot about that on my posts because a lot of diaspora children and adults, I still call them, we're still considered third culture kids, even though we're no longer kids. But they're not even, a lot of people aren't even aware that term exists. And so we think that that is like something that we're dealing with on our own. But once you bring that up, people are like, oh, wait, this is a thing. Like, this is something that people struggle with. That's a basic answer with what that is. I don't remember if you asked the second part of that question or if there was, that was it.
Yeah, I was just asking if how would this affect like their personal identity growth?
Yes. So the identity part of it is really challenging because, again, you're trying to fit in a world that doesn't really exist for, like, you're trying to mold your own world essentially. So you go home and maybe you have to speak Arabic and you eat Arabic food, you have to, tend to your parents and they tell you a certain way to live. Maybe they give you certain rules or certain guidelines and values that you're learning at home based on our parents' culture. So prior to going to school, we're hearing and learning all of this. Then we go to school, and now we hear and see that there's a difference, that other people do something completely different than we do, sometimes to a pretty major degree. It's not like maybe every American household may have different culture at home, will have a different culture at home. But at least the differences when they go to school would be a lot less intense than somebody who's like learning. Maybe some people don't even teach their kids English. Like I know, I never spoke English with my parents growing up. I was speaking Arabic. I learned English in school. So there's that aspect of it. So now as you get older, especially like when we get to like the teenage years and high school years, we're trying to like form our own identity, trying to figure out what we want, who we want to be with, what kind of career we want to do. And a lot of times that can clash as well. So we kind of, in terms of identity, we don't feel fully accepted in our home culture. Like, let's say we travel back home to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, wherever you're from, Palestine, you're seen as the American, like the American child that's, privileged or whatever. But when you come here, you're still not seen as the American. Like, where are you from? Oh, you must be, you're exotic. So from the American perspective, you're not ever American enough. And from the Arab perspective, you're not Arab enough. So then that causes you to be like, well, who am I? How do I become enough of anything? Am I I'm letting down this community. It may feel like you're letting down the communities when you're not, but that's what it feels like. So we tend to, we call that code switching. We learn to kind of like separate or have like two aspects of our personality, and we may become one person with our family and then like a completely different person when we're out with our friends. So that causes confusion for us internally because then we don't know which one is really us, like which one of these personalities, and maybe it feels like both of them are. So there's the code switching, there's the masking, maybe like hiding parts of yourself from certain people, hiding certain things from your family, not telling them what you want to do on the weekends, maybe a lot of lying, and then feeling guilt and shame about that, or maybe hiding parts of yourself from your American friends or your Western friends because maybe they'll laugh at you for having certain values. So it always feels like we're kind of walking on a tightrope and like trying to figure out what to do so we don't collapse. And it can be exhausting and causes a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
And now I actually want to head into stereotypes. So I'm sure we both know that there are millions of Arabs that are non-Muslim.
Yeah.
However, in the West, people tend to think that all Arabs are Muslim. So I wanted to ask, how do you think that other stereotypes about Arabs that have been placed in the West affect Arabs in terms of representation and mental health?
Greatly. I'm one of those Arabs that's not Muslim. My family's Catholic, but I mean, I always say I don't really practice any religion, really. I'm more spiritual, but I always see Arab hatred framed as Islamophobia. And I do understand that there is a privilege with being like a Christian Arab, for instance, because the West tends to, just like we're not as visible. Let's say we don't have like maybe a woman who wouldn't wear a hijab. Maybe there's so much. There's some privilege to being part of the religious group that is present in the country that you're living in. So there's that. But at the same time, we still experience discrimination and hatred. And I think one of the biggest things is because they've created this hatred towards Islam and they made it like this terrorist. Um, they categorized it as like a very extremist religion. I think that it serves them to want to erase that other religions and people exist when they're Arab. So I think if they can convince everybody that no, they're all Muslim and we already taught you that Islam was bad, then now they can be um now they it's just a phobia of all of us. It's easier to control the narrative. It's very confusing for people when I tell them, for instance, like they'll be like, oh, how come you're not wearing a hijab? And I'm like, I'm not Muslim. Oh, when did you convert? So like the ignorance is so big, and so when there's ignorance, it's again easier to control what people think of a certain group, and that impacts us on many levels. One, um, on in TV and movies, it's easy to just like categorize us as bad or terrorists. Um, Often, even in Hollywood, I feel like even Arabs don't necessarily express that. Now they're changing. Like now we have Mo, we have Rami, we have people that are like expressing that they are um part of us. But in the past, like people hid their Arab parts probably because of this, because of the stereotypes. When you have ignorance and stereotypes and negative understandings of somebody's religion, then it's easy to hate and it's easy to dehumanize and it's easy to then be able to carry out what we're seeing today with the genocide, for instance. It's like we are not seen as worthy or human. So, of course, many people are okay being silent. So it all works, for the system.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I want to head into the accessibility of mental health services, and a lot of mental health services are difficult to access in Arab countries in which trauma or anxiety is prevalent, for example, like Lebanon, Syria. Do you think that there is a lack of culturally relevant treatments for Arabs, and would that be something that affects their willingness to seek help?
Here in the West, absolutely. There's a lack of culturally relevant approaches. I myself, as a therapist, prior to becoming a therapist, was seeing a therapist or trying to find a therapist, and I had to go through like six or seven. And if I'm honest, I still haven't found, I have a therapist right now. She's great, but I still never feel fully understood. And I think that plays a big role in healing. People don't understand our culture. I've had therapists tell me, I think that like my family was super oppressive when they're not. And I've had people tell me to just cut family members off. So when you have people that are not being taught our culture, then it's hard for them to help us because they're going to give you tools and they're going to put you in the box of what their culture is like. They're never, first, we're complex, like we're not coming straight from the Middle East, but we're also not fully American, so we already have that third culture, and if somebody doesn't understand that plus our culture, it's really difficult. And also, even our entire, like, now in the process of deconstructing everything we've learned as therapists. So the diagnostic manual is written, it's written for men, mostly by men. And the criteria is very biased, and it's very, um, a lot of what we're dealing with is normal reactions like anxiety, depression. It's normal reactions to abnormal living circumstances. So most of the time, like, it was debunked that depression was a like a chemical imbalance a few years ago. Like, depression is real, anxiety is real, but the cause of that depression, most of the time, we see it as because of capitalism and period. Like, we're not supposed to be living the way that we are, working 40 hours a week, um, and with little time for family and collective bonding. But so when you go to a Western psychologist or a therapist, often they are everything, all your ailments, quote unquote, are being framed from this area to keep you in line to be the most productive human being for a capitalistic world. So it's already not really helpful, which is why people are in therapy for years. And they're like, I can never get better. Like, my depression, something's wrong with me. But nothing in the system has changed. So, like, we're still living in this system that is meant to keep us depressed and anxious. So there's that aspect of it. And the second aspect is the lack, like I was mentioning at the beginning, but lack of understanding of us and our culture and what we need to heal. And as far as Arabs go, we are collective. We like bonding. We like connecting with people. Religion does play a big role in a lot of people's lives, and just because it doesn't play a role of mine doesn't mean that I don't understand. Like, when I see a client, that it may in theirs, and I cannot dismiss that. Whereas I think a lot of Western therapies do tend to dismiss that part of it. But I've had clients that was the thing that I just had to help them reconnect for themselves. Even though I'm not religious, that doesn't mean that I'm going to impose they not be religious. So for them, that was what helped them in that moment. So I think that all of that combined, it makes it really difficult for us to find something, or someone that really helps us. And there's a lack of Arab therapists as well. Now I'm seeing more and more, and that makes me really happy to see that a lot of people are choosing this profession and speaking out, because I think that'll make people feel more comfortable. At least our generation, like millennial, Gen Zs, I think our generations are more open to it. Our parents' generations, I think they're like, no, like, we need to keep the secrets in the family. It's another thing. Like, why are you going to talk to a stranger? So they don't realize that's not gossip. It's really just like about ourselves. But I think for us, the younger generations, as we get more people interested in the profession, and we connect together, then maybe we'll have more people seeking out more competency as well.
I wanted to ask if somebody grew up on the idea that seeking therapy is for like the crazy or whatever, how would you be able to shift that mindset for that person?
That's a very big misconception in our culture, right? It's like, in I remember when I was living in Syria a little while, and I was studying psychology, and people were like, why do you want to work with crazy people? With the majaneen, they would say. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's not what it is. So it's really a lot about education. It's just educating people about what therapy really is. It's therapy was formed, actually, if we didn't have, like, this capitalistic world, then maybe therapy wouldn't even have exist as a profession in the way that it is. There's been healers throughout history, but um, basically there's a lack of communal services in our world, and so therapy is just a place where people go to release, talk, um, and one of the things that make it helpful is what something we call psychoeducation, which is education based on, you know, what different things are. So like, what is anxiety? What is depression? Why does it happen? And a lot of times, I think what works for our Arab community is starting to talk about it in a scientific way. So it doesn't help. Like, I know it doesn't help when I tell my mom anxiety, like anxiety this, anxiety that, anxiety everything. No, like you guys make an excuse for everything. And I'm like, okay, mom, let me explain it to you this way. And then I start talking about the fight or flight response. I start talking about our autonomic nervous system. I start talking about the hormones that are released when certain threats arise. And I start explaining that this happens naturally, biologically. And I give examples. I'll be like, have you ever been in a car and then like you missed a red light and then your knees got weak or your legs got weak? Or have you ever been pulled over by a cop and your heart started racing really fast? It's biological. What's happening in that moment is called anxiety, but it's biological. It's being driven by like, so I think with our community is like the education, but making the education in a way that they're like, oh, wait, hold on. This isn't because we're crazy. It's something that happens naturally. And then in the long term, when it keeps happening, then it obviously starts impacting our thought processes and it starts impacting our quality of life. And what we're trying to do is kind of ease that neurobiological, physiological response. That's what we're doing in therapy. We're helping our physiological response, and people are more open to listen in that way. But yeah, educating people, bringing awareness is very important.
That's actually a very unique way to put it. I've never heard of anybody that's like discussed it like that. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, as I'm a trauma therapist, so I do deal a lot with nervous system stuff. So when I realized that like a lot of people didn't realize that, they're just like it's for crazy people. I'm like, no, 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 like this is what's happening and then give examples. I started seeing a more openness to it. So maybe I should make a post about that because people maybe
You got
haven't
a
heard.
post idea right here already.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I want to head to secondary trauma. So many Arab countries, including Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, they're undergoing oppression, displacement, trauma, genocide. I wanted to ask, how would it affect the people in the diaspora who are watching the violence through their phones, whether it be on social media or whatever platform they're on?
Yeah. um, Very heavily, and we don't really know fully the long-term effects of what it's going to cause. But vicarious trauma is a thing. No matter what we're watching, I mean, they've done studies even on video games, and seeing violence in video games causes, certain things to happen. So imagine watching for almost 2 years, like nonstop live streaming of violence as the world continues to turn as if nothing is happening, right? And it's your people, it's people that look like you. It's like, so you have that, you have the anxiety, the depression, the possible trauma. So vicarious trauma can impact us just as if it were happening to us. We can have PTSD symptoms, we can have trauma symptoms, nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance, anger, depression, dissociation. All of those things are possible from constantly watching and having nowhere to offset that trauma. So if we're just sitting on our phones or on TV and just consuming, consuming, consuming without doing anything, without taking action, then our nervous system again feels that we are helpless. It's learned helplessness. We are helpless to do anything about it. We shut down. We can go into major depression. If we're watching, because obviously none of us can really get away from this content, we're watching and we do something about it, whether it's putting that anger, that rage into action. So if we're um, compensating all of the trauma with something healthier, let's say calling our representatives, or protesting, or sending money to organizations, or setting up community resources, grief circles, attending grief circles, um, trying to change laws, trying, doing something, then we don't reach necessarily that helplessness stage because we're putting all of that energy somewhere. So if we're watching without doing anything, then it can really damage us. I'm not going to say it doesn't damage us the other way either. It does. It's obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of like, are we going to be having nightmares about this 5 years from now? Because it's the first time in history that we are like we've seen Holocaust, for instance. We've seen lots of wars in our lifetime in history, but never to this extent live streamed. Like, I've never in my life seen body parts and broken up and burnt until now. We don't know how that's going to impact us, but we try to do our best. I think that's the most important part, is like, what are you doing to be just watching? Then you're probably going to really struggle. But what are you doing to offset that? Are you helping families over there? There's lots of things that we can do. And I know a lot of people that don't do anything, they're frozen. And I always try to encourage those people to, the more you do, I know it feels like you can't, it feels like it's too heavy and you can't do it and you don't have the energy or the time. But even the smallest thing can really help your nervous system and your body feel like you're not helpless. And, but yeah, we're going to ask this question again in a few years and see how it shifts.
I also wanted to ask, in contexts like Palestine, where occupation and genocide are currently ongoing, how would you even begin trauma recovery for children and adults when the threat has remained for years, for more than 70 years, has not ended yet?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because there's, how do you recover from something that's ongoing? You can't. It's like you're trying to put a fire out on your body when you're living in the house that's on fire. Like it doesn't, it doesn't, you're not going to heal what you're going to. First of all, I think I had heard a few psychologists talking about that in Palestine. PTSD does not exist because there's no post. It's traumatic stress disorder. It's not post traumatic stress disorder. So, and we see them doing it better than I could ever give you an answer for, because I watch videos of them dancing and doing debke and celebrating and connecting with family and helping each other. You'll see a person sharing food even though they haven't eaten for like a week or more, right? And they're helping each other. I think that's the answer. I think it's, what are they, we have to look to them to see, what do they need? What are they doing that's keeping them alive and surviving and connecting with family? And that's what I see. So when I see that, it's like, there's nothing we can tell them from the West living here, because I will never understand. None of us that live here will ever understand what it's like for somebody in Palestine going through that. So I can't possibly give you how to heal. We have to see what resiliency do they have that has been working for them. And some of the stuff, like I mentioned, it's that community support, people helping each other, lending a hand, feeding each other, joy, acts of joy. Like sometimes we're like, how they're singing, they're dancing when they can. So there's so much that we can learn from them. But yeah, it's not a question for us to answer here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to head back to Arabs in the West. So, as we know, for many youth, especially in the West, there's a mix of stigma, identity struggles, and a merge of primary and secondary trauma. So, I wanted to ask, as a psychotherapist, what advice would you give to an individual who's navigating through all this, um, the grief and silence?
With everything happening, yeah, I think it's connecting. That's grieving, connecting, not trying to shut down our emotions. So like leaning into what we feel. We're really taught that we have to be strong. And the definition of strength is the opposite of what we think it is. So A lot of us, if we say be strong, it's like don't cry, shove it all in, go about your day, you're going to be okay, count your blessings kind of thing. But really, strength is being able to experience the wide range of emotions that we have as humans. It's extremely strong to have feelings this day and age, extremely strong to be able to grieve what we're witnessing in the world and be able to get up every day. And function in the society that's bombing our countries. So one of the biggest pieces of advice is do not run away from the pain. Be in the pain, feel the pain, cry it out, share the pain, whether it's through art, through music, through connecting with other people, talk about the pain. Set up things to offer services and receive services. So, really, it's not about disconnecting. And that's what limit your social media intake. No, it's not necessarily what we need to do. What we need to do is see what we need to see for our people, but feel what we need to feel. The only way that we really get traumatized is when we have unprocessed emotions that live in our bodies. Remember, we're talking about the neurobiology. If that emotion is it's happening, you're watching it, it's happening in your body. If you repress that emotion, if you keep it contained, then it's no different than shaking up a bottle of Coke or Pepsi or whatever we're not boycotting right now, Palestinian cola, shaking it up and uh opening, like not opening it, right? The moment that eventually it's just going to explode. So the best thing you can do is see something, it's like shaking and then opening it and then allowing that pressure to come out a little bit. So feel your feelings. A lot of people don't tell you how to do that. Feeling your feelings is really just noticing what's happening for you, naming it, being like, oh, why am I feeling this? Oh, this must be grief. I feel really overwhelmed. I have a lot of thoughts racing through my mind. Allow that to be there. Focus on that body, release it, cry, journal, whatever ways work for you. Go to the gym, dance, write poetry. It doesn't, everybody's different. You have to find what really works for you and share, connect with another human being. That's one of the most important parts. Because once we share that with somebody else, and we find that they feel the same way, do you know how much release we get from that? That's why therapy works most of the time. It's like, wait, I'm not alone. And being able to process that doesn't mean it's going to go away. And I think that's a big misconception. Healing and processing through it doesn't mean your anxiety or depression is just gone. It just means that you've given it some breathing room, and then you keep going.
I think that's amazing advice, and I do also want to add that it's definitely easier said than done. So,
Yes.
you know, like being
As
able,
I'm not gonna lie, as a therapist, I'm dealing with a lot of stress, anxiety. I'm getting sick once a month now, and it's probably because of everything. And I realize that, so I acknowledge it, And it's even as a therapist, people ask me that question all the time. I'm like, I have every tool in the book, and I still get anxious. It's not about not being anxious. So
I also think that some people tend not to acknowledge their struggles, so they kind of downplay themselves or whatever, you know?
absolutely, yeah, they feel like it's a weakness.
Hmm.
So they don't know, they don't have awareness of what it is, what's happening.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. Well, this was an amazing experience discussing mental health with you, and I'm sure that the people will benefit from your insights and your experience. I think your work on social media about mental health of Arabs in the Western community is amazing and eye-opening, and I believe it's also making a difference in the community. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
No, this was a great conversation. Your questions were amazing and much needed, and I do hope and I do think that whoever listens to it will be definitely benefiting. Thank you for doing what you do.
Of course. Where will people be able to find you if they want to learn more about your work?
So they can find me on Instagram and YouTube as Micheline Maalouf, TikTok as well. Micheline, just my name. I think sometimes it has a dot in the middle, sometimes it doesn't. But if you type in Micheline, usually I'm the one that will pop up. And yeah, they can feel free to follow on there. I can't check messages always, but I do periodically go through them. So if they have questions, they can send them my way. I also have a website. I can only see clients right now in Florida because of the licensing um, issue of how it works, but my practice is Serene Counseling. So SEREIN counseling.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.